Welcome to the Work Trends podcast from Talent Culture. I'm your host, Megan Mbiro. Every week, I interview interesting people who are reimagining work. And be sure to check out our Work Trends Twitter chat events calendar located at talentculture.com on the podcast page. Welcome to the Talent Culture Work Trends podcast. Today's topic is an exciting one, especially amid this extremely competitive jobs landscape. How to up your onboarding game amid, yes, it is true, the Great Resignation. Onboarding is a process that often goes overlooked until, well, it's too late. But with a strong onboarding process in place, you can set your new hires up for success from day one. In fact, Glassdoor reports that organizations with a strong onboarding process improve new hire retention by 82% and productivity by 70%. Those are big numbers, and that's going to make onboarding hard to ignore. So, how can companies make sure their onboarding process is up to snuff? Well, we're going to find out real soon with my guest, Laura Lee Gentry. Laura Lee Gentry is the Chief People Officer at Onboarding, headquartered in one of my favorite places, Austin, Texas. At Onboarding, Laura Lee is responsible for talent acquisition and onboarding, total rewards, talent management, leadership development, internal communications, and employer branding. With Laura Lee's unique combination of business, operational, and HR experience, she focuses on helping companies to scale rapidly while deepening and enhancing their culture. Prior to Onboarding, Laura Lee was the Chief People Officer at Applied Systems and SVP of Employee Experience at UKG. She received her BBA in Finance at the University of Georgia and her MBA in International Finance and Strategy at the London Business School. She resides in Atlanta, Georgia, and I just want to say a hearty welcome to you, Laura Lee.
Thank you so much, Megan. I'm so glad to be here.
You have really awesome experience, so I can't wait to just get into it right away with you. Why is there a disconnect between candidate and employee experience?
I think a lot of times, Megan, it's about communication and perception. The things that aren't said can lead to a disconnect between expectations and the reality of a new job, or being less than explicit can create the wrong interpretations. Companies, hiring managers, and recruiters need to be open, transparent, and honest about the company and the opportunity. We also need to be super clear with employees and candidates that business needs might call for a pivot so that you can avoid the whole well, that's not my job conversation. You really need to make sure you're clear with the candidate about what they're signing up for. If it's a role that has gray space, be transparent about that too. And I think that secondly, not having a clear and consistent onboarding program that sets your new hires up for success is also a big potential miss. You need to clarify and set clear expectations, both during the hiring process and during onboarding. That gives new hires the chance to avoid misaligned expectations for their role. Onboarding can really bridge the gap between the candidate and the employee experience. There's also a lot of pressure on talent and recruiting teams to hire right now, given the Great Resignation environment that we're all operating in. That strong sense of urgency to fill roles is fantastic, but it can also create risk about making the wrong hire due to impatience. And, I think also you need to make sure that your recruiting and your HR teams are aligned around the same set of goals. A lot of recruiting teams are separate teams from HR, and having those different teams with different agendas involved can really set things up for disconnects again. Recruitment goals could be filling the jobs and how quickly we can fill the jobs, whereas HR's perspective is more about the entire employee experience. It can be much more holistic versus what can be a transactional mindset with recruiters. I think the easiest way to align all the stakeholders to make sure that your candidate and your employee experience is cohesive and consistent is to really think about candidates, employees as your customer. If you put them at the center of all your decisions, it can be tremendously clarifying.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for bringing up the fact that oftentimes, not always, recruiters and HR teams are siloed. And you're right. The big word is agenda. Everybody's servicing their own agendas. How do we bring people together? And I mean, let's be honest, today, and I was a long time recruiter myself, expectations versus reality don't always match when new hires join a company. And to me, it's a shame because we have all the technology and tools to do so now. So why do you think it's still happening?
Candidly, I would be kind of puzzled why a company would have those teams be siloed. I think that really the most high-performing, highly functioning people and culture teams that I've been involved with are hugely collaborative across all the different kind of sub-functions, and they really lean into each other. And I think that that helps lift everybody's game to have a more strategic focus. So if you can solve it that easily just by how you're structured organizationally, that's an easy way to set you back on the right path. I think you also think about incentives, like what gets measured gets done. So what sort of incentives can be in place for an HR versus a recruiting team, and are they at cross purposes? So I think those are two of the bigger reasons why they're not operating in a cohesive way.
So we clearly need to rethink hiring strategies to focus on retention. Talk to us about that angle.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting that people are following the market as opposed to getting out in front of it. As an example, recruiting versus retention. It costs a lot more money to hire a new employee rather than retain your best talent, right? It costs between 50 and 150% of an employee's salary to replace them. Beyond the cost of losing and replacing an employee, you've got all sorts of follow-on costs like productivity, team morale. It can even impact your revenue if it's in a revenue-generating function. I thought it was interesting. There was an article in the New York Times. It was featured on an episode of the Daily Podcast a few months ago that was talking about how Amazon's had to kind of race to catch up on this. Amazon has always prided itself on having this hiring machine. Jeff Bezos believed that after 2 years, you've kind of maxed an employee's ability to be innovative. So he always focused on building this epic hiring machine. But now that Amazon is one of the world's largest employers, they actually are running the risk of running out of employees to hire. And so they're now shifting their focus on retention rather than hiring. I think that's great that they're shifting their focus to retention, but I think for a company to really have a true employer brand with integrity, they should be focused on a fantastic experience across the entire employee journey and make people not only want to be there, but be passionately engaged in being there.
Yeah, I love it. It's mindset, it's culture. I've said that since day one and will continue to. Yeah, you're going to run out of those options, especially as your culture starts to get larger. You're bigger in the media space. People are talking and, the list goes on. Your culture can take a hit. So what are HR leaders investing in right now to manage these challenges presented by the Great Resignation?
It's a great question, Megan. A lot of HR leaders are turning to technology to support their hiring, their onboarding, and their employee engagement needs, trying to not only create a more high impact experience, but also to increase the impact of their HR teams without adding headcount, because HR and talent acquisition and all the talent functions are struggling just as much as everybody else to find great talent right now. We're also seeing a rise in search traffic for things like employee recognition platforms and AI for recruitment. As an example, we're seeing in our research a 45% increase in Google searches for employee recognition platforms and a 74% increase in search traffic for AI for recruiting. We're also seeing HR leaders investing in and exploring solutions to support hybrid and remote work, the mental health of their people, and opportunities for professional development, all in an effort to be more retentive with their talent.
What would you say are the best practices right now in virtual onboarding? Like, how does this differ from traditional or in-person onboarding, for example?
Yeah, so, I believe that the needs of new hires aren't all that different when they're being onboarded virtually versus in person. Although their needs are the same, the approach needs to be drastically different. So I think the mistake a lot of us made early days was we tried to translate the on-site experience into a virtual world. Well, that could translate into like 3 days of Zoom meetings, which is not engaging at all.
That hurts. Hurts me just to hear 3 days of Zoom meetings at this point.
Well, and think about how it feels just to have information just coming at you with no dialogue, no genuine engagement. So what I recommend instead is translate the on-site experience, or throw away the on-site experience mindset, and instead curate a distinct, intentional virtual experience that's aligned with your organization's culture. Virtual onboarding is absolutely more challenging. You have to be more intentional. There's a lot more hand-holding involved across all the onboarding stakeholders, whether it be the hiring manager, the IT team, the new hire, their team, HR, talent acquisition, the list goes on. And I think, the biggest challenge when it it comes to virtual onboarding is connection and relationship building. We love Dr. Talia Bauer's 4C's of onboarding, her model. And what she talks about is that there are 4C's of onboarding: clarification, which is the single biggest indicator of success in a role. And that's, that the employee, as we were discussing earlier, understands the role, understands the expectations of them. Culture. What are you communicating to people during your onboarding experience around your company's culture and hopefully their alignment and attachment to that culture? Compliance, which is kind of a hygiene factor and all the things that you have to check through, whether it's security awareness, sexual harassment, et cetera. And then the fourth one, connection. And what she actually found in wave 2 of her research is that connection is the most powerful of the 4. It actually kind of sits across the other 3. And that's all about creating a personal connection, a personal relationship with that employee that's being onboarded. You also need to be thoughtful about how you distribute onboarding content. So back to my earlier example of 3 days of Zoom meetings, which sounds horrifically painful. Why don't you mix up the content into bite-sized pieces and make some of it asynchronous versus synchronous for your learning and content? The asynchronous content, people can tap into that whenever they're ready. They can do it on their mobile phone. They can do it while they're jogging on their machine, et cetera. But I think that giving people different ways of absorbing the content can be much more engaging. So kind of the 4 levers that we think about to create a successful virtual onboarding program are logistics, hiring managers, cohorts, and your approach. So if I talk about logistics, they still matter, right? This underpins all the other aspects of the onboarding experience. If new hires can't gain access to their company's IT systems, their ability to do work stalls. So you have to be prepared from a systems office setup standpoint and access, and also provide ongoing support and resources so that they have a smooth and streamlined experience. Then managers can make or break the new hire onboarding experience. It's HR's job to support and enable the hiring managers, provide the formal onboarding training, create a consistent experience by delivering centralized onboarding sessions for specific content that pertains to HR culture, company history, et cetera. But hiring managers are your secret weapon, right? That's, again, your opportunity to really engage that employee that's being onboarded and to really make them feel like we're glad that they're here and we're engaged with making them successful in their early days. A lot of our customers love the nudge functionality that we have in Onboarder's platform. It's one way to make sure that there's sort of a consistent experience that's been architected, and then the managers get nudged so that they don't forget to do things, right? Because their days are busy too. Forums for connection. The third element, it's harder to connect in a virtual setting, and new hires want to connect both on the individual and community level. So think about ways you can foster connection, maybe with simple things like onboarding your new hires in cohorts, or creating a buddy system, or creating employee resource groups, and also scheduling some fun virtual social gatherings. And then finally, this is kind of a red thread that needs to run through all of this: empathy and understanding. Starting a new job, particularly in a virtual setting, is inherently stressful. New hires want their employees to actively communicate and show them that they're welcome, accepted, and cared for. People, new hires included, love to know what the plan is, so let them in on the journey and their schedule so they know what's coming and they know why it's important and relevant to them. Your managers, again, should be actively checking in and asking how they're doing. We need to be flexible with our new hires and have our managers communicate explicitly and often about how excited they are to have them as a valued member of the team. So those are the 4 things that we really try to think about.
I like how prescriptive you're being today. I mean, I really think seriously, I think it helps.
Well, I tell my kids all the time, like, make your own mistakes, but don't remake the ones I made. So I'm just trying to share.
It's all good. So let's talk about delivering great experiences beyond onboarding, right? What are those moments that we're looking for in the employee life cycle that can create good experiences, if not great?
If you think about an employee's career journey with a company, there are so many opportunities around what I call defining moments. Those are your opportunities to absolutely win their hearts or start to undermine, erode trust and engagement. So I really like to focus on any moment of transition or any key moment of employee experience. So if you think about the peaks, those are the best parts of the employee experience. Think about the pits, those are the worst parts of the employee's experience. You can create peaks and you can manage through pits, but they're also transitions, the beginnings and the endings. Like, we all remember the first and last day of school, the first day of a new job, the first date with our spouse. These are all defining moments or moments of transition, which is why they're so memorable. So how can you focus on turning employee transitions or those defining moments into an absolute peak experience? Transitions inherently carry an element of risk and uncertainty. So they're often the moments where employees are feeling the most vulnerable. And that's exactly why they're so powerful. In these crucial moments in their lives, they will always remember who was there for them and who didn't show up. So I think as leaders and employers, we have the power to turn someone's defining moments into positive defining moments in their lives. And you have to train and develop your leaders to anticipate those and be ready for those and to understand what best practices look like in those moments. Because again, I think if you let them become a neutral or even worse, a negative experience, you can cause irreparable damage to the employee and employer relationship. And for me, it all centers around people, right? Our companies are our people.
Right. And, being in the moment, feeling it, right? Remembering it, whether, sometimes you do have to get a nudge. It's okay. As we're talking about it, we're only human. And, sometimes being prescriptive in these cases actually works.
And sometimes it's just what someone needs to engage their brain until it becomes second nature.
Can't believe it. Time is flying here. It's crystal ball time. So I want to hear from you as you look into your crystal ball. How do you envision the future of onboarding?
So, I mentioned nudges and reminders. So I think that proactive nudges will definitely be a part of the future of onboarding, but I think that they're going to evolve into something that's more personalized. So recommendations are based on the individual using potentially personas, but sending reminders, showing that you care for people. Hey, open enrollment for benefits is during this period. Do you need support? Sending proactive recommendations that not only enhance their work life, but their personal lives as well. I already mentioned delivering bite-sized content, but you can start to deliver those via automated nudges or automated systems. And then, of course, meeting employees where they are. Use mobile-first technology, social media, text to communicate. Don't expect employees to download an app that they don't already have. You'll get much better engagement this way. And don't make them go to specialized or unique portals. Try to have all the content that they need access to amassed in a very easily accessible, navigable place.
Good stuff. Laura Lee, I want to thank you for stopping by today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Work Trends Podcast, your favorite source for all that's new and exciting in the world of work. If you love what we do here, do me a favor. Make sure to share it with your friends, your colleagues, your mom. Hey, doesn't hurt, right? And don't forget to tune into our next podcast. Catch up with you next time. Thanks to listening to Work Trends from Talent Culture. Join us every Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern for a live Twitter chat with our podcast guest. To learn more about guests featured on today's show, visit the show notes for this episode at talentculture.com and help us spread the word. Subscribe to Work Trends wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave us a rating, review in iTunes. Share Work Trends with your coworkers, your friends. Look forward to it. See you next time.